Today we're going to continue talking about congruent triangles. And just a reminder, I'm just going to keep using the symbol. There's congruent, and I'm going to use a triangle symbol for triangles. But this time we're going to talk about showing that triangles are congruent. So in the last lesson, we knew that the triangles were congruent, and we could match up the corresponding parts. So each side in one triangle matched a side in the other triangle, and they were congruent. Each angle in one triangle matched an angle in the other triangle, and they were congruent. Well, what if we only know a few parts from one triangle match a few parts from another one? Well, if we know certain combinations of corresponding parts, if we know that they're congruent from one to the other, we can use some shortcuts to say that the triangles are congruent without actually knowing any more about the triangle. So we have several ways. We'll talk about a few in this lesson, and then we'll talk a few in the next lesson. So the first way to show that two triangles are congruent by only knowing a few things would be by this SSS Side 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 shortcut. And that means if I know that each side in one triangle is congruent to a side in the next triangle, so I know all three pairs of corresponding sides are congruent, then I can say the triangles are congruent without knowing anything about their angles. And so let's look at this first one. I like to find matching pairs. So I have a side in each triangle that has one slash on it, and then I'm going to put an S. We're trying to build SSS and see if we have that. I have another side in each triangle that has two slashes, so that's another pair of sides that are congruent. And that's all the markings I have on this picture, but we can mark something ourselves because we have this special property. You can see that this side, sorry, it's a little sloppy. You can see that this side is in both triangles. That side exists in both triangles. And so if I were to pull these two triangles apart, if I could rip them apart, pull them apart, that side would be in both triangles. And so therefore it must be the same length. Since it exists here as one segment, it's got to be the same length in both triangles. And so we're allowed to say, hey, those sides are going to be congruent. And so now we have three S's. And the thing that allows that to be true here is called the reflexive property. Not reflective, reflexive. And so you can see that every side in this triangle has a side in this triangle it matches with. This is what we can say these two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. And so if I'm looking to find the side, side, side shortcut, I want to go look to see if I have sides that are congruent. I have one here. I have another one here. And in the last picture, I was able to mark a third side because of this reflexive property. But that was only because the two triangles shared that side. They had that overlap where they were sharing a side. These two triangles exist separate from each other. And so as much as we'd like to mark these sides up and say, yeah, we have side, 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 we don't know that these two sides are the same length. There's nothing that indicates that to us. There's no markings on them. They are not overlapping in any way. And so we might think that those two triangles are congruent, and in fact they might be, but we just simply don't have enough information. We only have two of the three S's, and so we have not enough information to say that these two things are congruent. If I look at this one, again, I'm matching up the pairs that are marked. And then I'm looking for an overlap. I have an overlap here. I have the reflexive property. And so I can mark this up and say that's a third pair of sides. And so these two triangles are congruent by side, side, side. So the more we do these, the more you practice these, the better you'll be able to recognize them. The next one here is side angle side. There's a reason we put the letter A in between the two S's, and that's because when we're talking about an angle pair that's congruent, we want that angle pair to exist between the two sides that we're using to give us the S's. So let's look at this one, and I have a pair of sides there with two marks. I have the reflexive property because that exists in both triangles. So I have another pair of sides. And then I have two right angles. And so if both of those angles are 90 degrees, that means they're congruent to each other. And so I have a pair of angles. I have one angle in this triangle that matches an angle in this triangle. And so what I need to figure out is this angle between the two sides that I have marked up in both triangles? And so asking that another way is the angle I'm using made by the two sides I'm using in each triangle? And in both triangles, this angle and this angle are being made by the two sides. So this angle is being made by those two sides. This angle is being made by those two sides. And so my angle is in between my sides. So I have this side angle side shortcut. So these triangles are congruent, and I know that because I have two pairs of sides that correspond and are congruent, and the angles in between them are also congruent. Again, I'm going to keep with my practice. I'm matching up sides that I know are, or pieces that I know are congruent. I don't have any reflexive property here. I don't have any angles marked, but if we go back to this idea that we had a while ago this year, we have vertical angles here. These are vertical angles, this one and this one. And therefore, those two things are congruent, those two angles. Talked about that a while ago. Vertical angles are always congruent. No matter what we want to do with them, they're always congruent. And so if I look at this angle pair, so I can write an A, but I need to know, is it between the two side pairings? And if I look, it is. This angle is between the two sides I have marked. This angle is between the two sides I have marked. And so I can put my A between there, and I could say those two triangles are congruent. Let's look at this last one. I have a pair of sides. I have a pair of angles. But I don't have anything more, and I don't have anything in this picture that tells me that I have reflexive property. That doesn't exist. There's no overlap. I don't have any vertical angles, again, because they're not overlapping. To have vertical angles, we have to have some sort of connection between the two triangles. And so I'm simply just have a lack of information to say whether or not these triangles are congruent. Again, they might look like they are, and in fact, they probably would be congruent if we knew more. But we don't know anymore, and so we could say we don't have enough information to say these triangles are congruent. I wouldn't say they're not congruent. I would just say there's not enough information. And so the last shortcut we're going to talk about today is this HL. This is special just for right triangles. So we need to know that they're right triangles. And that H stands for hypotenuse. And that L stands for leg. So the hypotenuse is always the side across from the 90-degree angle. So if the hypotenuse in one triangle matches the hypotenuse in the next one, then we'll say the hypotenuses are congruent. And then the other sides in a right triangle are called legs. And so if we have one side that's not the hypotenuse that matches another side that's not the hypotenuse in the other triangle, then we have a pair of legs that are congruent. And so we can use this shortcut hypotenuse leg to show the triangles are congruent. So of course the first thing we need is we need to know these are right triangles, and these two are. So I don't know, maybe you put a little R, check. And then I have that side and that side match. They are not across from the 90, so those are legs. And then we have reflexive property here because they share a side. And in fact, that side is across from the 90-degree angle in both triangles. So that's our hypotenuse. Our hypotenuse must be congruent because they overlap here. They share that hypotenuse. And so we would say here, we could say these two triangles are congruent. That means they're the same size by using this hypotenuse leg shortcut. If I look at this next one, I know that they're right triangles, but I don't know anything about their sides. Okay, we know that that angle and that angle are congruent, but you can see there's nothing about the angles when it comes to hypotenuse leg. And so therefore, I'm going to say we do not have enough information in these two triangles to use hypotenuse leg. Let's try one more thing. We do have another pair of angles here because of the vertical angles. However, once we come to the next group of shortcuts, you'll find out angle, angle, angle. So having three pairs of congruent angles is not a way to show triangles are congruent. It's not one of our shortcuts. We can't just do any combination of letters. We have specific combinations. And so we don't have enough information to show that they're congruent. So one last one here. That's my hypotenuse. There I have a side in each, so we'll call that a leg. We got to make sure these are right triangles. Well, if this is a right angle, then this vertical angle is also a right angle. So this is a right triangle. And so we can say that these two triangles are congruent using hypotenuse leg. So that was a lot of new information, probably something you've never done before, that you don't have any past experience to draw upon. So when you're trying these four problems, I want you to say whether or not you can use side, 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 side angle side, hypotenuse leg to show that the triangles are congruent, or that you don't have enough information. And so when you're deciding that, you should do the same things that I did during this lesson, where you find matching pairs and document what you have, whether you have sides, whether you have angles, or whether you have a hypotenuse or a leg in a right triangle, and then see where you are. If you get stuck, please do ask for help. This is a new idea, a very new idea, so you might need some help. So try these four. Take your time. Good luck. So hopefully you got these right. If you didn't, that's totally okay. Like I said, this is a very new idea. Please make sure that you ask for help for some clarification on any or all of them that you may not have chosen the right answer for. And then move on to the practice. As always, if you're looking at these practice problems and you're stuck, please do ask us for help.